Hello my friends, welcome to my corner once again. Today I wanted to share with you some ideas on keeping a journal. Now before I begin, I want to make a confession. I used to be the kind of person who would buy a journal and would feel wonderful about it for 2 or 3 days, maybe a week at the most, and then after that I would completely abandon the project. 6 years ago I started buying these little notebooks, very basic as you can see, and that's when I started seriously keeping a journal. 6 years later, I have about 16 of those little notebooks, and I am very, very proud of that. So I wanted to share what it is that I do with these journals and how I keep a journal that makes me happy. At its most basic level, my journal is a log. I write down, today I started reading this book, today I watched this movie, today I listened to this or that band, things like that, right? So I can go back to it in the future and see what it is that I was doing at a given moment, and that helps me because I have a very good memory for many things, but for other things it's not that good. If you ask me, what were you reading last week? I can't remember because I read a lot, right? And then I might remember something that happened like 7 years ago, and I can tell you to the date what it was that happened. So it's a very selective memory. Keeping this journal allows me to write down those things and to use my memory for other more useful things. The first thing that I like about writing a journal is that I am writing it only for myself. Nobody else is meant to read these texts. I hope that nobody has been reading them here in my house. And this is something that we tend to forget. Many times, or most of the time, we try to write for other people. We write thinking, okay, I have something to say, I have a message to convey, and that entails that somebody else is going to receive that message and process it, etc., etc. Well, I write this journal only for myself, so there is no pressure. I just write down my thoughts, I just reflect on things that happen to me, I maybe respond to something that I have seen in a film or something that I have read in a book. So really, as I said, there is no pressure, it's just for the pleasure of writing. One of my favorite books is The Pillow Book by Sei Shonagon, and this to me is the best example of what it means to write purely for yourself. I urge you to check out this book because it's really a wonderful record. And it's one of my many models when I am keeping my journal. And also, it's a model for what I do in this channel. That's all I'm going to say about that now. Maybe that is something that I would like to explore in a future video. Another good thing about keeping a journal is that it keeps you active as a writer. If you're a writer, you have probably heard many times what some writers say when they give advice. If you're a writer, you should write every day. I'm not sure I agree with that. There are all sorts of writers. Some writers write every day. That's wonderful. Other writers take their time. That's wonderful too. There are even writers who don't write, right? I mean, you don't want to become one of those. But as I said, there's plenty of characters and plenty of personalities when it comes to writers. But if you keep a journal and you write at least something every day, even if it is just keeping a log or maybe writing down a quote that you found interesting or a passage that you found interesting from a book that you were reading, then that is something, you know. And after that, you're going to see that you soon start adding your own 2 cents to this dialogue that is established between the texts that you find in your daily life, and I'm using the broad definition of text here, from books to advertisements to video games or whatever it is, and your own texts, which in this case would be the entries that you add to your journal. My third point is directly related to the one that I just mentioned. I think many people see the writing of a journal as a solitary activity. And in a way it is, right? Writing is in a way a solitary activity, especially when it comes to writing a journal. You sit down and you write a text that is meant for your eyes only. But then at the same time, I see my journal as a dialogue. It is a dialogue between me and whatever texts I encounter in my life. If I read a book and I write down my impressions of it, if I watch a movie and I write a little bit of a review about it, then I am keeping a dialogue with that book. I am keeping a dialogue with that text. So even though I am writing by myself, it is a solitary activity, I am also in dialogue with the things, the experiences that I encounter in my life. So that's another way of looking at what it means to write a journal. Last but not least, writing a journal will also help you to explore 2 aspects of your person. I'm talking about your persona as a writer and your persona as a reader. I said before, these texts are not meant to be read by other people. But when I write a journal, I assume that I'm going to come back to it at a future date. Now, when I come back to it, something very strange happens, and you may have heard this from other people. They say, I wrote this thing at one point in my life, and then years later I came back to it, and I could not recognize myself as a writer. I wondered, was it really me? Was it I who wrote this? And yes, that is a very uncanny experience that most people have when they go back to the entries they wrote years, maybe even months before. That happened to me definitely, and I really enjoy that because it allows me to see the progress that I have made or how I have developed from the moment that I wrote a given entry, that is when I was a writer, to right now, the moment when as a reader I see myself reflected in these texts that I have written. I said before that I believe everything is a mirror, right? Everything that you see, every movie that you watch, every book that you read, we literally read ourselves into these things. And when you read yourself into an entry that you wrote in a journal, that's even better because you are dealing with two different aspects of your own person. Of course, you are the same person, but you're looking at different personas. That is a very interesting concept, actually, the concept of person and persona, and it's something that I plan to develop in a future video, so look out for that if you are interested. But going back to what I was saying, yourself in the present, you are looking at what you wrote in the past. It's a very interesting process, a very interesting connection that happens there between your present self and your past self, and of course the interval that has taken place between those two moments. That allows you to learn a lot about yourself, and that is probably my favorite aspect about keeping a journal. So those are my 2 cents on what it means to keep a journal. I do hope that you will take up this activity and give it a shot and maybe see if it works for you. I hope you enjoyed my comments on this topic. Thank you so much for stopping by and have a wonderful day.